As a horror-obsessed list-addicted millennial cinephile, there's one canon I've been compiling, rearranging, and generally overthinking for a while now. The best horror movies of the 21st century. Well, now that we're 2 decades deep, I figured it was about time I pricked my finger and recorded my ranking in blood. I'm going to do so in 2 lists across 2 videos, starting here with the 10 best horror movies of the 2000s. A couple of Crypt Keeper's notes before we get neck deep in the vampire broods and zombie hordes. Initially, I was going to simply rank what I felt were the 10 best horror films of the 2000s, but I decided to challenge myself by only picking a single film from each year. One from 2000, one from 2001, and so on. I mainly did this because I wanted to highlight a span of time, an entire decade of filmmakers and filmmaking. It also forced me to shine a light on films that I might not otherwise. Without that annual requirement, this list would certainly look different. Also, as a rule of thumb, I adhered to the US release date when possible. And finally, because it always bears repeating, this is my personal list. There's never going to be a ranked list that we would all agree upon, and that's the wonderful thing about opinions. Everyone has their own. With all that out of the way, here's my list of the 10 best horror movies of the 2000s. Starting at 2000 with Audition, directed by Takashi Miike. The setup for Audition almost sounds like a romantic comedy. A middle-aged widower is convinced to re-enter the dating scene, and so his movie producer friend sets up a fake casting call for him to find a future wife. Sounds fun, right? Well, when he becomes infatuated with a woman harboring some truly perverse secrets, the film sheds any shred of wholesomeness. Audition is one of the finest slow burns in modern horror, with one unsettling reveal after another, culminating in a most disturbing climax. I won't give it away except to say you will forever be changed by this line of dialogue. 2001, The Devil's Backbone, directed by Guillermo del Toro. This atypical ghost story is set in a mission-turned-orphanage for boys left after the Spanish Civil War. The film's prologue immediately casts a somber aura instead of something tense or scary. This air is felt in every derelict prop and each chord of Javier Navarrete's aching score. The Devil's Backbone feels like the spiritual predecessor to Pan's Labyrinth, in both tone and subject matter, and remains one of Del Toro's finest works. Maybe the things that go bump in the night just need a helping hand. 2002, 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle. While the notion of a virus spreading through a populace resulting in a societal collapse seems pretty far-fetched in 2020, I think we can suspend our collective disbelief just enough to engage with this apocalyptic nightmare. Of course, that would only get this film so far were it not for the seamless fabrication of a fallen England. 28 Days Later is among the most realistic zombie films out there. Alex Garland's screenplay raises challenging questions and explores fates worse than death. 2003, A Tale of Two Sisters, directed by Kim Ji-woon. While based on an old Korean folktale, this retelling focuses on a teenage girl, having recovered in a mental institution, returning home to her younger sister, father, and stepmother where plentiful familial strife awaits. What led to her being institutionalized is patiently revealed in this twist-filled and tension-stoked exercise. In addition to its own virtues, A Tale of Two Sisters essentially relit the beacon for Korean horror, which you can definitely expect to see more of in my countdown. – 2004, Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright. Never before, nor since, have I seen such a perfect blend of comedy and horror. Two best friends, perfectly cast as Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, go through the motions of yet another morning in their mundane lives before realizing they're in the middle of a zombie outbreak. There's gallons of blood and barrels of laughter to be had, but Shaun of the Dead strikes its strongest chord when depicting the possibility of losing loved ones. Edgar Wright's masterpiece is a musically charged romp that owes everything to the actor's impeccable timing and Chris Dickens' endurable editing.
They still out there? Yeah.
2005, The Devil's Rejects, directed by Rob Zombie. The new millennium brought a wave of nefarious protagonists in both film and TV, though perhaps none of them can match the vile nature of the Firefly family at the center of Rob Zombie's sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses. How this incorrigible clan remains engaging throughout is something of an unholy miracle.
What's the matter, kid? Don't you like clowns? Why? Don't we make you laugh?
Maybe it's because the other characters encountered on this fugitive road trip are so unlikable, whereas the Fireflies, for all their perversity, manage to persevere together. There are repellent stretches along the way, but its show-stopping bookends ensure The Devil's Rejects begins and ends on the highest notes possible. 2006, The Descent, directed by Neil Marshall.
I'm fine.
A somber stage is set when Sarah, played by Shauna McDonald, loses both her husband and daughter in a gruesome car accident. Months later, but still ripe with remorse, she joins her girlfriends on a spelunking excursion into the bowels of the Appalachian Mountains. This is claustrophobic cinematography at its best, and David Julian's phenomenal soundtrack knows exactly when to appear and disappear. It's not so much what they find down there as what finds them. This film rises above its bloodbath level, and there's literally a bloodbath at one point, by exploring the women's relationships with one another and Sarah's ongoing struggle with grief. Also, the original UK ending is the only ending as far as I'm concerned, and as for the completely unnecessary and drastically inferior sequel, let's just pretend it never happened. 2007, The Host, directed by Bong Joon-ho. A decade before he made history with Parasite, the first non-English language film to win Best Picture at the Oscars, director Bong made a trio of films that were just as deserving, my favorite among them being The Host. This is a dysfunctional family drama in the guise of a monster movie with ample socio-political commentary thrown in for good measure. Lee Byung-woo's score is foreboding one moment and madcap the next. Keenly aware of the film's darkly comedic sensibilities, the titular monster remains an impartial and intimidating presence throughout that imperils the lives of the Park family, but serves great purpose in bringing them together. 2008, Let the Right One In, directed by Thomas Alfredson. Set in 1980 Stockholm, this austere and understated tale revolves around Oscar, a 12-year-old boy who is bullied at school. He makes a friend in Ellie, who appears to be a 12-year-old girl, but is neither.
Om jag inte hade varit en flicka, hade du tyckt om mig ändå? Ja, det hade jag väl.
Let the Right One In at once brings a palpability to the well-tread annals of vampire lore, while extending a pale hand to the outcasts among us. While 2008 also brought the first film adaptation of a certain vampire romance saga, the mimetic phrase, "still a better love story than Twilight," has never been more apt. And while we've got our fangs in that topic, 2009, Thirst, directed by Park Chan-wook. The great Song Kang-ho plays a Catholic priest who becomes a vampire in the aftermath of a failed medical experiment. His newfound appetite for blood coincides with his attraction to his friend's wife, driving a stake into his crisis of faith as he feasts on forbidden fruits. Park Chan-wook's direction is as proficient as always in this morality play, which wonders to what extent one could be a force for good when they are a force of evil. And that concludes my list of the 10 best horror movies of the 2000s. What does your list look like? And if you want an extra challenge, only choose one from each year. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you down there. And stay tuned for my follow-up video, wherein I'll share my list for the 10 best horror movies of the 2010s. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Cineflect for video essays, film lists, and more. And click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. For Cineflect, I'm JS Lewis. Until next time, watch something scary.